Welcome the fuck back to the One Shot Show. My name is Matt, that's Patty, and I'm mad. Do you want to know why?
Why, Matt?
Because where the fuck are the dungeon crawl rules, Patty?
Oh, dearie me.
I sit down and I open my beautiful 5th edition player's handbook and I flick through.
You mean like this Dungeon Master's Guide right here?
My Dungeons and Dragons book. And I can't find the dungeons.
Hang on. I'll have a look-see while you rant.
Okay, yeah, because that's what this is going to be.
Okay.
Where the fuck are the dungeon crawl rules?
What's a dungeon to you?
So a dungeon is, in my opinion, it is a set-piece location. It doesn't have to be an underground crypt. It could be a lord's manor. It could be a dragon's lair. It could be an escape sequence through a burning village. It is a string of encounters through a discrete location, and we are trying to get to the end of that location. That might be getting to the outskirts of the burning town so that we are home scot-free and, you know, we've got the horses going. Yeah. It could be we have made it to the final room where the Lich resides, and now we're going to fight him. It is a classic boss fight. It could be we've made it to the Lord's chambers. We're going to steal the document that we're here to steal. Doesn't matter what it is. That's all a dungeon, right?
You're pretty applied to what's here, because a dungeon is not just dripping cave walls. It is many things in 5e. The farmstead with many rooms is a dungeon.
Exactly. But where the fuck are the dungeon crawl rules? The point remains. And now this is... So I'm going to give a little bit of preamble to this before I absolutely plow through this locked and loaded rant. 5th edition implies that there have been 4 prior editions of Dungeons & Dragons. This is very much a rant about 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons specifically. A lot of those previous editions, I've actually mentioned this before on the show, 5th edition, they say that there's 3 pillars, there's combat, there's exploration, there's role-playing, and it really only gives you rules for combat. It gives you some very loose things, like, just by the way, the persuasion skill existing does not count as rules to support the role-play pillar of gameplay, by the way. But dungeons were a fundamental part of it. They were often baked a little bit into how the exploration worked. If you think about the classic hex scroll, there were rules for how you handled overland travel. There were rules for how you would move through the strange underground crypt that you got to once you reached the hex that you were aiming at. Now, hex scrolls weren't the only way that this was played, mind you. You've got to remember that Dungeons & Dragons harkens back to wargaming, right? The things that were initially being built were things like, how far can you move? How do you move through a space? How many turns do you get? What do you do on your turn? Now, that meant combat a lot, but it also meant just moving through an underground location. Over the years and over the editions, those rules have started to disappear. And there's a really interesting reason for that. It's because everyone playing got really good at doing it and didn't really need rules to support it anymore because they had these really good frameworks for how to resolve something like a dungeon crawl in their games, many of which were actually already homebrewed and retooled. They weren't following the rules by the book. But it meant as newer editions came out, the people designing them were also highly experienced, and they would forget to put them in, because they already kind of knew how to do it, and their audience all kind of knew how to do it, which means we now arrive at 5th edition, which has more GMs and more players than ever before, many of whom actually have never played any of these previous editions. They never have looked at any rules for how to handle something like a dungeon crawl. They have no framework, they have no model for it, and 5th edition does not give it to them. There are no fucking dungeon crawling rules.
I would agree.
So, where the fuck are the dungeon crawl rules, Patty? They're right here on my phone, because I wrote them down.
Wait, you've written your own, or you've adapted something from the past? What have you got?
What I have prepared today, I have 3 different frameworks for how you can run a dungeon crawl.
Cool.
So when I talk, and by the way, I despise the degree to which 5th edition has functionally required that GMs find third-party sources. However, I have made for myself a quite useful career of providing those third-party resources, so I can only bitch and moan so much. But nonetheless, here are 3 different ways you can handle dungeon crawls. First one is very straightforward. Think of the dungeon as a different mode of gameplay. In the same way that when we roll initiative, we're switching out of whatever mode we were in previously, we'll call it storytelling mode, into combat mode. And that is a very distinctive shift. We're going from this free-form thing to this very rigid, everyone acts on a turn. On your turn, you can do these specific things. We're locked into that until combat ends.
That's like when I go on Roll20, when the map comes up, because I run big dungeons on Roll20, and there is a change in the atmosphere, but I agree. Players don't have to know, like, can I just move my token anywhere now? Like it's like, and sometimes if you have a badly behaved player, they'll start moving through doors and walls before you know it. And you go, like, no, we We actually need to codify how we're going to move through this
Exactly.
absolutely massive map.
So this is codifying the dungeon mode. This is
Yeah,
one of
nice.
3 ways to approach this. I'm codifying the dungeon mode. So, in combat you have initiative. In the dungeon crawling mode, we're going to take marching order. So we resolve in marching order. This means the players get to decide, right? Which they should, because the squishy wizard doesn't want to be first. Especially, they don't want it to be, I rolled the highest, I now have to go in front and I'm going to get absolutely murked every time we walk into a room full of skeletons. The barbarian wants to go closer to the front to be a mute shield, or maybe the scout does, because they can perceive and disarm traps very well as they go. We're going to set marching order. Now, on your turn in marching order, you have 3 different ways you can approach your move. You can take a cautious move, which allows you to move 10 feet forward. It incurs a -5 penalty to your passive perception, and it allows you to perform 1 action, right? That's your sort of standard. That's your sort of standard slow way. You have a normal move, which lets you move 20 feet forward, same penalty, -5 to passive perception, and it lets you perform 1 action. Or you have a hasty move. You can move the full 30 feet or up to your maximum, because some only have 25. It incurs a -10 penalty to your passive perception, but you can perform 2 actions.
Cool.
Now, everyone on their turn decides which of these things they're going to do. Now, let's talk about the sorts of actions. So again, in combat, we've very clearly codified the sorts of actions you can take. Things like attack, things
Dodge,
like
dash, disengage, all of those
exactly,
things are
cast
ruled
a
up.
spell. It's all there. So, here are a few actions that you could take. These are just some examples. Come up with your own. Detect hazards. Make a perception check to attempt to perceive a trap or hazard within that same room or corridor within your character's field of view. Disarm a trap. Make a skill check to disarm an adjacent trap, right? We've detected the trap. Now the rogue's going to move forward. They've got this great skill to disarm traps, which rogues tend to have. Attack. Let's perform a single attack targeting a creature or object. Melee, range, whatever. It's the attack action. Cast a spell, same thing. Self-explanatory. Scout ahead. Make a perception check at a -5 penalty to attempt to perceive traps or enemies in the next room. So an adjoining room to the room or corridor you are in. It is scouting ahead. Sneak, make a stealth check to perform your move undetected. Interact with an object or a mechanism, pull that lever, whatever. Look, this isn't much, but this is giving you a framework. So when we enter the dungeon, let's take the classic 5-room dungeon. We set a marching order. We're going to move through the first corridor. The rogue decides he wants to go first, and he goes, right, I'm going to scout ahead, and I'm going to move. And I go, yep, cool, make your roll. He makes the roll. He rolls quite well because he's got very high perception. He took expertise in that particular ability. And I go, yep, you can hear the distinctive sounds of shuffling footsteps in the room ahead. You hear a lurching groan. Depending on how familiar they are with this thing, I might go, yeah, you suspect it's some kind of undead, zombie-esque creature, And then things proceed from there. Then maybe the fighter goes next, and he goes, right, I'm gonna move forward slightly further. I'm gonna do a normal move. Oh, you walked into a trap. The rogue didn't choose to perceive or disarm traps, and now this has got sprung on you. And that's decision space. The rogue, whenever they come into a dungeon, are going to be thinking, is the most important thing to perceive what's in the next room or check this corridor?
Yeah, and it would stop that thing that players do, like, oh, I would have done that.
Exactly.
And it also stops that thing of, often if I'm narrating a dungeon, and I will go, you go through the door, and then all of the table goes, no, we did not, sir.
It makes it clear when they can do the things that they reckon their character ought to be able to do in a dungeon. Which,
and it gives your traps teeth.
Yes.
And it gives them a sense of, sometimes with a trap, it can feel like unfair play by the GM or by the map itself.
Yep.
But here you go like, as you do in combat, to go like, oh, do I go over here? Do I go over there? Do I attack? Do I cast my concentration spell? Creates an accountability of choice.
It also means that those classes and those character concepts that you would expect would be better at dungeon delving and doing things like disarming traps and being sneaky and stealing things like rogues, like rangers, like to an extent artificers potentially for trap design. It means that they actually get to do this thing that they're clearly meant to be good at. That is one version of the dungeon crawling rules. That is a very granular version that probably rings a bit closer to how combat works. That's not the only way you have to do it, though. If you like the more freeform, the more broad approach that sort of moves through relatively narratively, we can go slightly less granular. This, I call this the activity system, and this straight up takes its concept from Pathfinder 2nd Edition that has an exploration mode where you choose exploration activities. And it basically says we're going to be moving overland for the majority of this day or this stretch of time. Here's the rules on how far you can move based on your movement speed. And you pick an exploration activity. And that's usually something like scout ahead or cast a spell, which is, you're repeatedly casting detect magic or something along those lines. There's a really great one in there that I love called Follow the Expert. That look, this works for Pathfinder because of how the modifiers and things work, but you can roll a check using their modifier.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. You're still using your base skill, but you're using their modifier. Which prevents that thing of we're all stealthing, but the big oafish, clumsy barbarian steps on a twig and blows the whole thing. And flavor-wise, that is the rogue going, oh, hold on, you're about to step on a twig. And the barbarian going, oh, oops. And then the rogue going, just place your foot there. And the way these exploration activities work is you move at half speed while you're doing them. So if you want to move faster, if the whole party's in a hurry, they might just have to omit doing these. Or maybe you've got a character that has invested a lot in movement speed so that they can move at, their half speed is the same as everyone else's normal overland speed or as fast as the slowest character's regular speed so that they can still be scouting ahead the whole time. Here's how that looks in a dungeon. Again, we're going to take marching order. Instead of resolving things turn by turn, we're going to resolve it room by room. Cool. So for each room, you select the dungeon activity you are going to perform for that time. These are very simple. It's a lot of the same as what we had before. It's detect hazards. You make a perception check to detect traps in the area or in that room. Maintain a spell. Cast a spell or, recast the same spell over and over. This is your detect magic. This is like a cantrip that you could easily be utilizing. This is maintaining something like light, potentially, or anything that might require concentration. Sneak, make a stealth check to move undetected. Scout, make a perception check to gain a +1 to initiative if there is a combat in the adjoining room.
Yeah, cool.
So it looks slightly different to how Scout did previously because knowing that there's enemies up ahead isn't as helpful when you just sort of default move from room to room. But it does mean that you're going to get a little bit of a bonus in going into it. You're going to get a benefit for having done that. And then Follow the Expert. I've just lifted that whole cloth because I think the idea that everyone can be, moving carefully, they're using their acrobatics to try and get around this tripwire, and then the one unacrobatic character is like always going to trigger it anyway. That's not actually very fun. So this allows us to get a little bit out of that, and it might be that you get half their proficiency modifier or something along those lines. The advantage of this system is that it's a lot looser. If something happens, we can just kind of pause our marching order while we resolve it. Maybe someone trips a trap. Yeah. We pause marching order, we resolve it, someone maybe disarms it, or maybe we have to go into combat mode and roll initiative to resolve things turn by turn.
Traps used to be an initiative. It's such a great way of running them.
It gives us a lot of flexibility.
I love that. It makes me go, because we know we're going to move through the dungeon room by room, it stops. Sometimes when I'm running a dungeon for players, they can get really caught in paralysis of checking every door, checking every trap, checking everything, to the point that every room becomes the same rinse and repeat without an escalation in drama, whereas this would allow for everyone's in, they've done their activity, now there will be a consequence, we roll on to the next.
What you're describing is the 10-foot pole problem.
Yeah.
So for those who are unfamiliar with this, it became mechanically optimal for the frontmost party member in a dungeon to always at all times be using a 10-foot pole to be tapping around the space in front of them to potentially trigger any traps or detect things 10 feet in advance.
Now it's a familiar or an unseen servant.
Exactly. And it's kind of not very fun. It is the absence of rules. It's having an ability that lets you ignore a mechanic rather than interact with a mechanic. So I'm all about giving reasons to interact with the mechanic. So that system does a similar thing where people who feel like they should be able to do a certain thing get to be able to do that certain thing.
Cool. What's the third?
The third option, this is dungeon-wide roles. So this is separate. This is now taking another step back up where we're even looser, we're even more broad. This is just a very loose framework. At the start of the dungeon, we're still going to have to switch into a dungeon mode of some kind, but at the start of the dungeon, everyone has to determine their role, or maybe you want this to be something baked into the character. So actually at character creation, they also decide what dungeon role they're going to have. And those roles each do particular things. There are certain checks that you, the GM, will likely prompt, and you will prompt certain roles to perform those checks.
This is sounding similar to the journey system from 5e Lord of the Rings. Have you encountered that in your thing?
It's a little bit.
I love that because I've played with that rule set before, and it's really cool to make a journey feel distinct and to give your character a very clear niche in what you're about to go ahead. And again, it stops everybody going for that niche.
Yeah. And the other thing as well is it prevents this issue of, hey, you perceptive character, roll perception, and they roll a 2, and then every other player is like, can I also roll perception?
Yeah.
This puts it in the rules, No, you can't.
It is this
you are not
character's
that
job
role.
to be. What are the jobs? What are the functions that you talk about?
Wayfinder. The Wayfinder gets to do things like scouting out rooms with their perception, checking rooms for traps, so on, preventing the party from getting lost if it's in a more sort of overland open space. That would be maybe a survival check. Providing early warning about upcoming combats. That would be a perception check. This is your rogues, your rangers, anyone that has that perceptive scouting, dungeoneering kind of function within a party, narratively, thematically speaking. Investigator, similar kind of crossover here. They get to do things like checking for traps, checking for hidden doors and other secret rooms, seeking details relating to puzzles and potentially how to solve them, or riddles, disarming traps, disarming hazards, unlocking doors, that's sleight of hand or thieves' tools. Warder. A warder is checking for magical effects and hazards, using their arcana skill mostly. They're protecting from magical threats and attacks. So if they notice that there is a glyph that if they pass over it will cast fireball, it's perception checks to notice things like that, as opposed to what the Wayfinder gets to check for or what the investigator gets to check for. Investigating magical components of puzzles, riddles, hazards, all that sort of thing, and then maintaining ongoing spell effects. So that's the sort of thing that a wizard is going to want to do, or a spellcaster is going to want to do. The last one is a point man. Point man is keeping everyone prepared for combats. So that could even just be a check where they get to, pick an action that lets them give their initiative bonus to everyone instead of just themselves, for example, instead of doing a different action. Protecting party members from physical attacks. So, oops, we accidentally triggered this trap. It fires a bolt at the person who triggered it. The point man now gets to make a check to intercept it.
This is the role for your barbarian or your fighter, who typically would have very little to do in this scenario.
And look, you can come up with as many of these as you want, but they're effectively trying to do the exact same thing. They're trying to give clear, definable roles that let characters do the things it feels like they should be able to do in this environment. So, Paddy, there's the fucking dungeon crawl rules. I'm going to have these. I'm going to have a link to these in the description for this, so that you can see them for yourselves. Come up with your own. Use these as a framework. I don't give a fuck what you do, but there's the fucking dungeon crawl rules. This has been the One Shot Show. We'll see you in the fucking next one. If you're enjoying listening to the One Shot Show, why not support us on Patreon? Go to patreon.com/OneShotShow, where you'll be able to find video versions of our episodes, long form bonus episodes that we release every single month, access to our community Discord server. You can pose questions for our special Q&A episodes, and if you back at the higher tiers, you can even vote on what questions we cover in our show. Check it out.